This is What's Your Take? Real talk on leadership and life. I'm your host, Dr. Nikki, the DBA pharmacist and founder of FitBiz Global Solutions, LLC. Welcome to a very special episode of the podcast. Today's not just about leadership in theory. It's about leadership in real life. And for us, that starts at home. This is part one of a two-part tribute to someone who shaped our leadership and our lives, our father. I am joined by Al and Zanda, my siblings, and we're here to reflect, laugh, remember, and hopefully inspire. Because sometimes the most powerful leadership legacy begins in the family. So I'm going to pass it over to Al and Z. Why did we feel it was important to share this story now? Al?
Yeah, well, I think it's important because when I think of him, the first quality that comes to mind is consistency, right? So he showed up. He showed up for us. He showed up for his responsibility. He showed up for his community. And consistency builds trust, and trust is the foundation of all leadership. So if we think of what he did in terms of leadership, he was an educator. He spent a lot of times in the civil service. He spent his time in local government. There are so many different areas in terms of where he portrayed leadership within the broader community. And so that's one of the first things that comes to mind, consistency. And so if we think about, especially as nation builders and all the areas that he actually touched, this is really what leadership is about. And this is really what we want this story to be about. Additionally, this mirrors what we know today as transformational leadership. And what does that mean? That means, where he's inspiring others through vision, consistency of his character. And from my view, I feel that he transformed us not with grand speeches, but with daily actions. And those actions that, if we think about it in a broader context of all persons who showed up, for even when, the unfortunate timing of, him departing from this world, just reflecting back to that point in time when many persons showed up, surprisingly, we were overwhelmed in terms of how many persons were actually there. So this really shows from a broader prospect what other persons think of our father and who we thought we knew. They knew him just as well. So that's what this episode really means in terms of why we want to share this story now.
Thank you, Al. To continue with this segment of what this episode means to us, I'm going to pass over to Z or Zanda. And once again, if you can answer the question, why did we feel it was important to share this story now?
Me being the clown of the family, you can't really expect you to follow behind Alcindor with that rendition. Okay, I'm here on the ground, being here after God's unfortunate passing. It was like weeks later, and people kept coming up to me and they said, "Man, Sandra, you realize how big your daddy's funeral was?" He said, "I honestly didn't know who were there." They were like, people were parked way along the road on Gladstone Road, and, even from my cousin perspective, from my first cousin, she would always say your daddy was a man of stature. He had a good reputation. People looked up to him, and they looked up to him. And everyone wanted to protect his image as he started to pass on to the afterlife. For me, growing up, he was daddy. He was a disciplinarian. And though he never beat us, I don't remember getting beat by him. But, I know a lot of people talked about how he impacted their lives. He set them on the straight and narrow. And I guess like Al said, he was very consistent. He loved his suits. And he didn't have jeans. So it was quite funny. But, he was an interesting guy. And he was a leader in many ways, more than most. So I think it's important, and also like Pastor said at the funeral, we can't let, and also the minister was there, that we can't let his legacy die. We have to carry it on. So I think that's why while it's fresh, It's important for us to start this now.
Yeah, that was very good in terms of why we feel it's important to share the story now. And just to follow up on that, I think it's important, as mentioned, in this time of leadership globally. We find that transformational leadership is one of those leadership qualities or strategies or directions that we want to actually follow. Someone who can inspire and motivate us. And that is what he did. He did it from the home and he took it on to his professional life. And that's why so many people have positive things to say about him regarding that. So on to the next question. When we think of that, what's the first leadership trait or moment that comes to mind? Al?
Right. So this is an interesting one. This is actually a really, really good question because there's so many things that we can think of. But when you say to narrow it down to one thing, that makes it extremely challenging. However, I think we're always up to a challenge. So for me, growing up under Dad's leadership, I think if we look at it from a broader perspective, we absorb lessons that shaped our character and our outlook. So if there's one thing, I would say it's about integrity, right? And sometimes people ask, what does integrity means? And a good answer I usually give is, integrity is, whatever you do outside and people can see. Even what people can't see, if they were able to see it, there would be no difference in terms of what they see, what's out there from what's within. And I think that brings us back to another part of leadership, what we call adaptive leadership. So one thing I would think about in terms of a phrase, if I could summarize it to that, it's, do it right the first time. And honestly, as a child, I thought it was all about chores, right? Like washing dishes, cleaning the car, sweeping the floor. But as an adult, I realized it's about integrity. It's about excellence. It's about doing things right in the face of pressure and uncertainty. It's about adapting but never compromising values. So it's really all about discipline. And that's one of the things, if you could ask maybe some of my uncles on my mother's side, boy, he's a school teacher, but discipline. He was a disciplinarian. Even at the service, if I can reflect back then, the one thing that I remember the pastor, the reverend saying is, I expect there to be discipline, right? And so that's the one thing that continues to come to mind. And that's one of the key things in terms of lessons from childhood.
Okay, great. So Z, if you want to follow up on that, when we think of that, what's the first leadership trait or moment that comes to mind?
Okay, I'll have to pick one. Okay, so what Daddy did. Daddy, he's a man. He's an alpha male. So one time it was raining and we were walking on Bay Street because, every summer, Mommy and them always used to make us go downtown. They would tell us the history of the Bahamas from Bay Street. And so it started to rain. Mommy felt she could hold the umbrella better than Daddy. So Mommy was holding the umbrella and Daddy walked off. He was like, Mommy, why Daddy walk off? Mommy's like, oh, don't mind Daddy. Because, he is mine. He can't be out here. God, how you trying to be out here with all these women and y'all holding the umbrella? That can make me look, right? And so that's that. But if I may, I'd like to tell another story. And it was so random. The drain was clogged at home. And like the water wasn't going down the sink, in the kitchen sink. And so I tried to figure out how to clog this drain. Daddy come, he came the cup. There's always this orange cup. I think I took the orange cup from the house. It was a plastic cup. And he put it in the drain, and he do it like that, and he unclogged the drain. And I look at him in awe. And when we see the look on my face like this, girl, like, yeah, Daddy just took your whole soul just now, I thought he was the greatest person in the world because he unclogged that drain with a cup. So I think that was as children, we all have the parent we experience, we all have different lived experiences. And I think my own was from childhood definitely was very funny. So his leadership was always a bit softer on me as opposed as it would have been, or his discipline a little bit more different than it would have been on you and I. So those were my two experiences that I can remember, my first experiences.
I agree with that. It seems, in any family, siblings probably can relate when it comes to discipline, etc. It's probably tough on the older siblings. And to add to that moment, I think for me, it was more about standing up for yourself, okay? And being a leader within, even if you're not put into that role. And it reminded me of a time when there was a hurricane back in Nassau, and it was like, I think my boss at the time wanted me to come right back into work when we were dealing with our own situations in overcoming the aftermath of the hurricane. And I didn't particularly like the way in which that was being handled. And I spoke to Daddy, okay? And we talked about it, and I said, this situation isn't working out. And what I got in that moment was support. I got support from him in terms of what I should do. And he was the one that delivered that resignation letter for me. And to this day, that's the mindset I have in terms of taking control of your own destiny when it comes to being in any role, be that a job or anything else. So that was one of the lessons I learned. He was not judgmental when it came to that. He supported you. He supported common sense decisions. And that's what I appreciate from him. And so now moving on to segment 2, which is lessons from childhood. We're going to just go back to what was some of the earliest lessons taught about life, work, or showing up for others. And I think, Al, you mentioned something about work and in terms of that. So I'll let you answer that question just to follow up on what you said earlier.
I think one of the earliest lessons is about perseverance, never giving up, consistency, and even if it doesn't look like things are working out the way you would like it to, right? Continuously have faith. Have faith in yourself, but even deeper, have faith in the God you serve, because that is where your strength cometh from. And with perseverance, it builds character in terms of who you will become. I think honestly that is what is, in my words, the definition of what hope is. And so I think that, and I'll just bring it back to a story that I remember, because when we try to think about all of this and leadership and how this all comes together, it's all about even though you're a leader, it's about that team around you, and the team around you is really your family, right? That's your team that really helps you to be a great leader. And I think for Dad, that's where that came from. And I'll reflect on a moment where I got into a conversation and Mom was there, and I never forgot what she said. And she said, your family, and wife is like the neck, You're the head, you can lead. Now take that head and try to move it, but don't move your neck. Just try to move it. See how you're going to get that done. And sure, if anybody tries to move their head without using your neck, right, it's rather impossible. And so as a leader, it's you coming to the realization of that and just recognizing that, through faith. And if you're consistent, you just push through, you can get things done.
Absolutely. Did he say something often that stuck with you?
I would say that. Yeah. There were a few things, but I'm thinking that the one thing that consistently comes to mind is, to me personally, is son, you have to know what it is to be a man. As a man, the buck stops with you. You can only rely on, at the end of the day, you're here for the family, but you have to rely on God. You have to consistently be strong in your faith. And even to as he was coming to his demise, unfortunately from this world to transition to the next, That's the one thing that he held true. And that's the one thing that consistently sticks with me. You have to have faith. You have to have faith. The other thing that also stuck with me is, you always said, it isn't really about you, because leadership isn't about, again, since we're speaking about leadership and tying it all in, it isn't about how you rise, but it's about how you can impact and help others and lift them to rise and to climb. And so that particular part, one was faith, and the other part is just ensuring that you consistently see how you could help others. And so one of the things that comes back to me is, and I tell this even to my wider team, through our communications and through what I do, it's to, if I can accomplish making you a better version of yourself each and every day, then I would have held true to who I am in terms of my person, and then also the teachings that I would have gotten and the lessons that I would have learned. Right? Back to you.
Okay.
Nikki.
Okay. So, Zanda, I'm going to ask you, did Dad say something often that stuck with you?
Yeah, Daddy said a few things. One thing, I listened to my brother and I wondering if he had the same daddy.
Stop it. Stop
But I'm
it.
kidding. It's like Daddy was so serious with him. I think by the time I came along, he was tired. Because he always would say, make hay while the sun shines. He would always say the decisions you make determines the future you create. So those are definitely the two things that stuck with me. He said a lot more than that, obviously, but definitely those are the two things. Obviously, faith was one of them, but um, definitely that was what he used to talk about. We used to talk more about politics and world geopolitics and geography and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I would have to say the same. One of the things he really talked about was world events, and that's something I'll probably miss the most because he was really up on everything that was going on. So you could have a very long, spirited, intelligent conversation where he was talking sense, you were talking sense, and your thoughts aligned. So definitely that's something I would say that is going to be missed and stuck definitely with us. Just through having conversations. And I think we can agree that, the earlier children, they do tend to take the brunt of that seriousness. We all had the same daddy. However, the parenting style was clearly different with each of us, I guess.
No, but it explains a lot. Oh, sorry,
yeah.
go on.
Yeah, I wore him down for you guys.
Yeah, because Al is very giving and
Yeah.
very and he's very caring and he does look at the whole picture. And
Yep.
now I see why. I think by the
Yep.
time they reach me, it was more like, hey, take what you can get for you. You know, I remember one time, but mommy used to come to borrow money from me because I was tight. Mommy says,
Mhm.
Sandra, love is something that you give it away. You can't be so tight with money, because I used to give me an allowance when he was making overtime. I was dead
Mhm.
rich. So when they cut all overtime, I see me and I was broke, Trent. I was hurtful. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to just dive into the next segment about Dad's leadership in the community. And he wasn't just a leader at home, as we know. He had real presence in the community, the church, and his career itself. What do you remember most about how others looked at him? I'm going to ask Z first.
Because, I remember Daddy being he was Domino's champion. I think, yeah, he was a Domino's champion, and I think he was president of my PTA. I used to make him go to all of those events. So yeah, he's really integral in that. I remember our PTA at high school, at Government High,
I remember. Hmm.
and then also he's in Kiwanis. He's very busy in that until he wasn't. And yeah, he was always involved in something. He was big. Oh, how could I, at least, how I could forget? Cat Island Sailing Club. I mean, that was the whole thing, where they named the last regatta after him because he really helped bring that forward, make him more well known. They could speak to that if they wish one day. Yeah, and people were really they loved hearing him talk. They loved his jokes. And he was really good at strategizing and organization.
Yeah, that's true. Al, do you want to chip in there? What do you
Yeah,
remember most about how others looked at him?
yeah. Well, in addition to what Z said, he also liked to play ping pong. I remember him back in Weston. He used to love ping pong. He also was a very avid in basketball. I think at the funeral, I remember a gentleman, I think Cecil Thompson, saying that he was the Michael Jordan of our day, right? So basketball, was his thing. Even so much when he went to Princeville, honestly, that was one of his moments that he was really happy about when his Falcons won BAISS Bahamas Association of Independent Secondary Schools championship. And for a long time, Jordan Princeville was the team to beat. And and that is what, when we look at leadership in the community, that's what he was about. And the reason why I think when we talk about sports, especially areas like, say, basketball or for young kids, those are the areas in which they become leaders, right? You have someone on a team and they're the team captain and they're coordinating, they're telling, if they're point guard or they're the center, they're telling other persons what to do. So yeah, they may have a coach, but then on the court, then they lead their other peers. And that's where leadership begins. But it happens if someone first believes in you, right? And this is where Dad was strong in terms of making sure he gets out there in the community with with the Principals Association, in the church. As you mentioned earlier, that was a big area for him. And because of that, people respected him because he embodied, when we talk about leadership, servant leadership. And servant leadership is key here because if we think about one of the greatest persons who demonstrated servant leadership was Jesus Christ. When you talk about somebody who was willing to come and say, wash your feet, wash the disciples' feet. It's like, yeah, I'm leading you, but I'm not afraid to serve you either. And so this was one of the things that embodied Dad in terms of what he did. And when you summarize, you try to ask yourself, talking about dominoes, ping pong, sailing club, he led, but he was then being a servant as well, meaning he rolled up his sleeves, and if he needed to get it done, he would do it. He listened, he guided, and he had invested in people with his time. Because a lot of times we don't recognize the importance of time. Time is one of the most important commodities that we have, right? We give up our time, in communities, in work and what we do for, okay, I want to make this amount per hour, and these are the benefits. But giving up your time and not getting anything in terms of financial rewards, that's key and the foundation, in my opinion, in terms of what servant leadership is.
That's good. That's a good reflection. Are there any moments where you were surprised to realize how much he impacted others?
Well, yeah, I will tell you how he was surprised. One came up at the funeral when it was, I think, about 7 persons who were singing, and they said, hey, 5 of us used to be his students, right? Then they also said that, they were looking for a place to practice, and he's telling them, listen, you guys can practice here at Princeville. He didn't charge them anything, and he gave them a space. And that's impactful because here it is, you have a group of young men trying to, I call them young men. Other persons may call them being younger for longer. But from where I see, anyone under 80 is young. Under 70, sorry, is young. And so that's impactful. That's impactful.
That's important these days.
Yeah. Well, God scared, 10, right? So that's 70. So yeah, you're under 70, you're still young. As you get older, you start to reflect and you recognize the importance of this. But no, that is key simply because you don't realize how impactful things are until people speak about it, right? I would always say that we as human beings don't tend to remember a lot, but we do remember those things that were extremely great and important and touching in our lives, that had a very good feeling about that, or those things that are really bad. The stuff that in between is be a little difficult. So when people reflect back, when others reflect and talk about he was impactful to them, unbeknownst to you, that is what becomes most memorable because you never actually expected that.
Yeah, I remember those moments too at the funeral. And another moment was when one of the principals at one of the other organizations under the Baptist Convention said how he was so inspirational and supportive in her getting to that leadership role. And then she shared the moment of how he would always call her, every school year to reassure her and wish her good luck. That made me a bit teary-eyed because knowing that is not something she's going to have again, But that was really good. I was very proud of that moment. I also saw, like in comments of the tributes, how people said, I was able to have multiple promotions under his leadership. And that is so good. Those are the kind of leaders we need today. Z, do you have anything to add to that before I move on to the next segment? Any moments that you were surprised to realize how much he impacted others?
I think, every time I go to different locations, I meet students because they would recognize Zuri. They don't know me. Because Zuri was there at Jordan, Pennsylvania. So I would find even there was a teacher, religious teacher, who would always give Zuri money. And you see it because of just simply the impact that he had on his life. How he got him a job and all that stuff was always a good reference. I had teachers calling me from the States. It was like, oh man, I was about to pick up a call, daddies, because I wanted a reference. He was always one of my best references. So he was really influential in setting people on their feet because of the amount of connections he had, simply because of the words he would say. He had a way with words. So yeah, that's my experience.
Yeah, that's good reflection as well. And I'm gonna just jump into the last segment before we wrap up, and it's about how his legacy still guides us. And I want to say and ask the question, how do you think Dad's leadership shows up in how we lead today? Whether your careers or any challenges, how does that leadership reflect on you today? Al, you go first.
Okay, Dr. Nikki. Right. Yeah, again, though Dad is no longer here, and I want to say, I know this is about Dad, but when I think about my legacy in leadership, it's really a combination of Dad and my mom, right? They both played a key role, especially if we're talking about me and my leadership and what impacts that. And so there are moments in my leadership journey where I stop and think, what would Dad do here? And almost always the answer is act with integrity, lead with courage, right? In fact, I have a coin phrase that persons within my workplace, in my work environment knows, and it's very simple. It says, I am battle ready, battle tested, and I ain't never scared. Okay? Because that also is coupled with a combination of my dad and my mom, who, when she had reached her point, she had said, Alcindor, come pray with me because I'm here afraid to die. And when she was finished, she told me, always remember, fear is not of God, fear is of the devil. And always remember and promise me that you will remember that. And then I had to repeat it. And I said, yes, Mom, I remember that even in the face of everything, always remember, fear is not of God, God is love. And so that coupled with that, that's where I say lead with courage, right? Be bold in the face of any adversity, because remember, the Lord God is the source of your strength and your refuge. And last but not least is always remember people first, okay? not to say take anything away from you in terms of what you're doing, but be there to stand in the gap for those who are less fortunate. And when I say less fortunate, being able to stand for themselves at that particular point in time. Because how things go in life is a circle. And today you stand for persons, and tomorrow, even if they can't stand for you, they usher up some prayers, and angels stand in your way to defend you and to keep you strong. So in today's language, I guess we would call that adaptive leadership. Just responding to challenge, being nimble and resilient, and just having moral clarity, and just again reflecting on things with Dad. When I think again, when people were at the funeral, you kind of remember what Cecil Thompson said, and they put him in a place with hardship, capital H. And
I remember that.
and I remember Dad having discussions with me about how difficult those areas were. And honestly speaking, that shaped my life in terms of where I have decided to be in my career. And so I've never worked for government, okay?
Yeah.
God willing, I don't intend to unless it's in a consultancy area, only because those discussions were so transformational. They were so going through the struggles with him and how it impacted him, impacted me. And not to say never, because, I don't think that's a good word to use, because something I always remember, you don't pass nothing until you die. But that was one of the key things from, Dad and his struggles, and just trying to, with the best intentions of being there for people and being with integrity and leading with courage, and to sometimes have that misinterpreted by others. And that's the one thing that we can never control, the narrative or how people perceive what you say. Even as we do this recording, it's how someone may be listening to this. This may impact persons in different ways. And you could maybe have a room of 10 persons, and for 10 persons, it may impact each of them in different ways. So we can never control how what we say impact others. And that's the key thing I learned from Dad. It doesn't matter what people say, right? Just do what you have to do. Once God is your strength, your refuge, and you hold in faith, the only person that you got to answer to at the end of the day is God.
Absolutely. So, Z, I want to ask you another question. Have there been moments where you paused and thought, this is what he would have done?
Oh, that's a heavy statement. That's like, what would Jesus do? Daddy was, Daddy always give people, I think, second chances. They don't be quick to judge people. He was a bit open-minded when it came to dealing with different, this in terms of professionally.
Yes.
Yeah. He don't be too quick to jump to conclusions. He like to investigate first. I've had especially recent instances, or just instances in general, where you deal with people. I know one thing, Daddy never used to really sweat too much. Sometimes some things would bother him, and they'll bother him long. But once people show him where they stand, he was quick to just let that go. Oh, yeah, I've had those instances at work where you investigate a problem, you don't judge the person, try to see where they're coming from. You definitely believe in second chances. Yeah, I've had those instances.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely, as I mentioned before, he was not judgmental in terms of you even making decisions. He was not as judgmental in, if people did certain things. And second chances, yeah, there were many instances of that. And for that, I must applaud him. And that is, I guess we can say that's how his legacy still guides us. And I just want to say thank you to you too. But we're not done yet. In the next episode, we're going to talk more about how we're carrying this torch forward. But for today, we're just grateful for the foundation he gave us. He led with love, grit, and grace. And through us, his legacy lives on. Thank you, and until next time.